Hi, it's V with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I have an alternative for the July 2022 paper pumpkin called Sending Good Thoughts. As you can see, there are 3 card designs, and this month I'm basically using the same components for each card, but just arranging them in a different way and making them interactive. So for this card, I've done a little bit of stamping on the inside of the card, and then on the front, I've tucked this bottle in underneath the waves, and it can be pulled out to reveal the sentiment. I'm excited to show you how to make this card, so let's get started. Here are the supplies for the card, and most of them come from the kit itself. I'm using the Fresh Freezer card base and the embossed panel, the largest of the bottle die cuts, the coral, seahorse, and starfish, and then I'm using about 10 inches of the linen thread, but the exact amount doesn't matter, so you can use more or less depending on what you'd like and how much you have left. The only extra paper that I'm using is this little strip of basic white cardstock that is 2 inches by 1/2 inch in height. Embellishments are optional, but of course they're fun. Search through your stash for your favorites. A good choice would be the iridescent rhinestone basic jewels. And I'm using something very similar. You may recognize it as some leftovers from the March 2022 kit. These are also iridescent, and the colors that come across when the light hits it go really well with this kit. In addition to the Bermuda Bay ink that's included, I'm also using Memento Tuxedo Black ink for the sentiment, and then Poppy Parade and Rich Razzleberry. I'm using a sponge dauber to apply the Rich Razzleberry ink, but a blending brush also works. I'm using a craft knife for this card, and ideally you would use a cutting mat with it in order to protect the blade. But we're making a small cut and it's going to be pretty quick, so if you don't have a mat, you can use that chipboard that comes in the kit packaging in a pinch. And now we're ready to get started. I'm going to start by preparing this panel. This is the one that's got the embossed details on it. I want to cut along these embossed waves so that I create room for my bottle to be inserted. So I'm going to do this about in the middle. So I'm counting down 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th set of waves from the top. I'll place my bottle here as a reference point, and I'm going to mark each side. Now you would want to do this lightly in pencil, but I'm going to make it a little bit darker using my friction pen so that you can see what I'm doing. Now that I know how wide my bottle is, I'm going to go ahead and take my craft knife and very carefully cut along the wave so that it goes a little bit past the borders of my bottle. I want there to be enough room for that bottle to move freely. It may be easier to move the paper around and change the angle so that you're cutting comfortably. Once you have your cut made, go ahead and test it out. That moves really easily, so I'm happy with that. Go ahead and erase your marks. This ink erases with heat, so I'm going to use my heat tool here for a second. There is some ghosting that appears on some colors, but on a light color like this, it's really not noticeable. Now it's time to get inky. I've got my silicone mat down to protect my surface a little bit. Now here's one of the sheets of die cuts, the one that the coral came from. I'm going to be using this negative space that's left over as a stencil. So I'm going to place it along the bottom here of my card. And I'm just going to take some sticky notes to mask off the other openings that I don't want to use. Here's that rich raspberry ink. I think this color coordinates really well with the fresh freesia. I'm just going to gently tap with my dauber, and I'm actually going to tap off some of the excess here onto my scrap and make very gentle little circles in this space. Now, as you get down here, where you've got these little pieces that come up, it's more fragile, so be careful. You can use your other hand to kind of hold that down, or you can also just kind of pounce on the stencil rather than making those swirls. All right, let's take a look. So there we have our first piece. I'm just going to move it over and create another one that's overlapping a little bit. Next, I'm using Bermuda Bay with that seaweed stamp, and I'm going to stamp full strength and then also move it over and stamp again without re-inking, which is called second generation stamping. Now I want to do another faint one over here, but when you go off the edge of your paper like that with your first stamp, see how the ink is uneven? I don't want to go ahead and use that now because that's going to create a line there. So instead, I'm just going to re-ink it, and I'm going to stamp off the excess ink onto some scrap paper and then come in. Now for the starfish, I'm using that texture stamp with all of these little dots, and I'm just going to be stamping randomly. For something like this, we don't have to worry so much about creating that weird line with the second generation stamping because it's not going to be really noticeable like it would have been for the seaweed. And I'm going to pause to clean off my mat here. I'm stamping my sentiment with Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm going to stamp about halfway down the bottle so that it can stay hidden while the bottle is all the way tucked in. You can stamp a little bit lower than that, but don't go any higher. I'm back to the Bermuda Bay ink for the little cluster of starfish. I don't want these to be too dark though, so I'm going to stamp off on my scratch paper first. I'm stamping my card base next, so I really want to make sure that that surface is clean. Here's my card base, and I'm going to stamp a little bit on this inside part right here. I'm going to stamp the starfish in Poppy Parade ink, but I don't want it to be too bold, so I'll stamp off on the scratch paper first. And now we're done with the stamping and we're ready to assemble. Here's my bottle die cut, and here's my linen thread. I'm going to hold the end in place and give myself a little tail to work with, and then I'm just going to wrap some around until I'm close to running out, so maybe right about there. Then I'll go ahead and tie a little knot. Once I have a knot, I'll go ahead and insert it into my panel here. So you can see how it's going to go. And then I'll turn everything around. So now I'm looking at the back of the panel and at the back of that bottle. Remember that little piece of cardstock? This is going to get glued to the bottom of the bottle to act as a stopper and prevent it from being able to be pulled all the way out, unless of course you would like it to be able to, in which case you would leave this part off. I'm going to go ahead and take my silicone mat again and just put it down underneath here so that I don't accidentally have stray bits of glue. I'll add a little bit down here. And then apply this on top. I'll give you a closer look. I'll wipe off some of that excess glue, but I just want to show you from this side that I'm leaving a gap here. If I put the stopper all the way up, lining these edges together, then my bottle is not going to be able to pull out as far. Just going to clean off some of that excess there. I'm going to add some foam around the edges here. That's going to elevate this panel and allow the slider to move more easily. You can definitely use those dimensional foam stickers that come with the kit. I'm a fan of the foam adhesive sheets because they can be easily cut to whatever size that you need. And I'm a little bit lazy about peeling off the backing, so this just makes it easier for me to be working with larger pieces. The thickness is the same as the dimensionals, and so you can use them interchangeably. I'm going to put some along the bottom here. And then I will do the sides. And I'll leave some room for that bottle to move around. Then I've got one for the top, and I need to trim that off a little bit. I mail out most of my cards, and so I like to give them a lot of support so that they survive through the mail, which is why I'm pretty generous with the foam. Now I'm ready to go ahead and put the panel onto the card base. Just going to flip this open really quickly and make sure that the stamping is in the right place and that I don't have it upside down. I'll start to peel off the backings and center the panel. Once I'm happy with the placement, then I can go ahead and peel the rest of the backing off. You want to test and make sure that you're happy with how far the bottle goes down into the card and that your message is hidden. And then it's just a matter of gluing on the rest of the decorations. I'll curl up the tips of some of the die cuts and won't glue them down so that there's a little bit of extra dimension. And then just adding those gems for a finishing touch. There's our finished card. We've got some stamped images on the inside to coordinate it with the front, and then of course there is that fun interactive element. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to try out the project, I would love to see it, so share it in my Facebook group or tag me if you're sharing elsewhere. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin but don't yet have a demonstrator, you can find that link as well as all of my other links in the description box below. I hope to see you again next time, and until then, have a great day.